First of all, welcome you everyone to this workshop of Ask Me Anything, wherein you can ask any of your queries or any of your doubts, questions relating to your career switch to data science. You can be from any domain: mechanical, marketing, sales, operations, IT, retail, any of the domain, and you can directly ask your questions relating to a career switch, relating to the field of data science, which projects to practice, and how you have to switch your career smoothly. So, with us to answer all these questions, we have the expert for the day, Rahul Kashyap, sir. So, first of all, sir, I would welcome you on the behalf of LearnBay. And yes, now you can please continue.
Thanks a lot, Diksha. Thanks a lot. Hey guys, welcome everyone again. So today what we're going to do is, this is an Ask Me Anything session. We'll start off with some commonly asked questions that we've received over emails or messages. So we'll start off to sort of set a context for the next part of the discussion, and then we'll invite questions from you as well. There must be questions that you already have with you in your minds that you've been trying to find answers for. A lot of them you've probably already found answers for. So if there's anything that you would like to ask, feel free to keep putting it in the chats. So once we go through the first 5 or 6 questions, what we'll do is we'll immediately move over to the questions that you're sending out to us, and we'll answer those questions as well, to the best of our abilities. So thank you everyone for joining in. The first question that we look at, I think this is something that a lot of people are generally interested in getting a sense of. Data science carrying the kind of buzz that it does at this point, I think people from all kinds of backgrounds have looked at this as something that that could really bring a lot of change in the market with respect to how it sort of crept into almost all functional industrial areas across different kinds of market segments. And in that sense, data science is one of those technologies that very closely relates to a lot of other things that people do in business, be it product development, be it inventory management, be it supply chain management, in a lot of case, be it production planning. So a lot of these business decisions that are being made today have now started heavily relying on principles that we draw from data science. Now, data science, it's a very large sort of umbrella term. There's several other words that we keep hearing that are flung around in the market here and there. You've got things like statistical modeling, you've got machine learning, you've got artificial intelligence, and there are a lot of words that we keep talking about, and all of them have a lot of meaning. The larger umbrella term would be data science. In my mind, data science has always been something that gives you a way of doing business. It's a way of thinking logically. A lot of it seems very commonsensical to me as well, wherein you've got to look at how historical events have transgressed and based on them make optimal decisions on how to make the most out of the same processes when they repeat it again. In a lot of cases, it's mostly about going back at history, looking at the things that have happened, the reasons why they have happened, and where they've happened. So the basic slices of information that you can get out of it. And you ultimately use those slices of information to create an underlying model that is able to explain that behavior. The moment you're able to create that underlying model, that helps you go from descriptive analysis to what we now call predictive and prescriptive analysis. And that's where data science really comes in. And that's why it's something that has found applications across different kinds of industries, which is why this question keeps coming up. So why choose this as one of the technologies that you learn? Why choose this as one of the areas in which you upskill? Now, like we've already seen, we've got people from all kinds of backgrounds here. People from telecom, people from automotive, people from IT, people from product management, people from project management. There's all kinds of profiles, the different kinds of areas people are working in. But what we are seeing now with the industry is that all of these business functions are now trying to become data driven, if they haven't already done that. Now, this whole buzz around trying to make data driven decisions, I think it all started somewhere around 10 to 15 years ago. But it's really caught up pace in the last 5 years, which is why this seems like one of the most lucrative positions. If you go out on LinkedIn and try and look for a data science role, you'd see that at least 10,000 results that come in immediately. And that's testament to the fact that the number of opportunities, and it's established fact, the reports by major companies which say there's a huge demand supply gap. There's a huge demand for professionals who are trained in these technologies. Even if you look at how economies have moved in the last 5 to 10 years, digitization has been the word, and that's how the economy has moved towards a more digital economy. But in that sense, what we've seen is how products have moved from being rather orthodox and conventional to something that now provides some kind of intelligence to aid the user. So the journey of Flipkart from being a cataloging website to being a website that can now tell you what you ideally would want to buy, and ultimately pulling you towards that decision, that journey is something that is a huge testament to how data science has grown over time in the last 5-10 years, which is why without a doubt this seems like one of those things that definitely could have a huge impact in the long run. And that's one of the reasons why people would ideally choose and look at data science as one of the things that can be one of the areas that you would like to work in. Now, this is how I see why there's such a huge demand in the space, and the reason why that demand has been created is not something that has happened overnight. It's the sum total of a lot of events that have transpired in the last 10 to 15 years, which means that it's a stable movement, a movement that is going to stay like this for, say, the next 10 to 15 years at the very least, which is why it's one of those technologies that could definitely take your career forward in a lot of ways in the next 10 to 15 years. No matter what background you're coming with, you'll see these things start to happen around you. The better prepared you are for those solutions, the better suited you would be in those spaces as well. So that's my intuition. That's the reason why I feel this is one space that can really sort of make an impact. Please feel free to keep putting in your feedback as well, what you think about these questions. If there's something that you'd like me to talk about a little more. In my mind, this is how the whole question around why you should choose data science as one of the options that you're looking at, I believe these would be some of those reasons. So moving on, what we'll do is we'll move on to the next question. And please, like I said, keep putting in your inputs in the chat. I'd be happy to look at them. I think Riaz says he's into automobile domain with 7 years of experience. All right. Automobile is one of those domains that really has a lot of scope from a data science point of view. It's seen immense applications. So we will come to that. So thanks for that question. I think we'll definitely come back and touch upon that question again. That makes sense. The next question that I have in front of me is, who can become a data scientist? Now that in itself is again a question that sort of befuddles a lot of people. The general, the way the whole role has been marketed and the way there's branding around this role, it would seem like data science is something that everybody should be doing at this point. But in my mind, that's not always been true. Data science is definitely something that is an aspirational goal. It's a very modern technology, a technology that is here to last over the next 10 to 15 years, or definitely more than that. You've got other technologies as well that sort of connect with data science to give you some really good business outcomes, which means that it's here to stay, which means that it's definitely something that you could aspire for. There's no doubt in that. But the fact that the question still remains, who is it ideal for? So if we put it in a different way, data scientist, everybody could ideally become a data scientist. If you look at the kind of knowledge stack that is required to excel as a data scientist, the 3 core skills in my mind. The first core skill, if you look at it carefully, would be programming. Although I feel programming, the extent to which your programming acuity would impact your data science growth is not more than 10%. So programming is not more than 10% of what data science is about. So data science is much more about knowing what to do and when to do it, as much as it is about figuring out how to do a certain manipulation, how to do a certain analysis. The how is relatively easier, and that's where programming comes in. There's a lot of aid that you get from programming point of view. Several popular open source languages like Python and R that you can use with data science. Being a very large community of programmers, you get a lot of pre-built stuff that is easily available to you, which means that learning is not a major challenge. But from a skill point of view, knowledge base point of view, programming is one part of what you've got to do. Without it, it's difficult to communicate with the machine and be able to get certain kinds of analysis come out of it. The other technical stack that is required is a fair bit of mathematical rigor. So there's fair bit of maths that is involved in data science. So if you're comfortable, if you always felt that that is something that you can get comfortable with, in my mind, maths, if maths doesn't create bad feelings in your mind, you've been comfortable with maths all along. It's not very rigorous math, at least to get into the space. It's not very rigorous. If you get into the more advanced deep learning technologies and natural language processing or computer vision, if you go into those modules which are more neural network based, you'll see that the mathematical rigor increases. But if you look at most of the structured analysis that happens in the market, so a lot of industries are restricted to structured data analysis, where data is easily present in SQL databases and rows and columns. You can easily comprehend it. The moment you go to more complex data sources, be it audio, video, digital images, all kinds of those text, all kinds of those complex data structures are more difficult to ingest and make sense out of. The mathematical rigor there definitely goes a notch up. But for most of structured data analysis, which is still, I believe, more than 65% of what the data science industry is doing right now. So that space does not require too much maths, but it still requires a fair degree of comfort with ideas like statistics, machine learning, statistical modeling. So those kinds of ideas you'd still have to get acquainted with. So that's again something from a knowledge point of view that you should take care of. In the third major skill that you'd probably require for data science is business intelligence, is an ability to comprehend markets. Now, in the beginning, we saw that we've got people with all kinds of experience levels. There are people who are early in their careers, say within 3 to 5 years. There are people who are really experienced, who really know what they're doing in the industry that they're working in. They've been there for a long time. They understand that space, how businesses work in that space. Now, that knowledge is something that is extremely crucial and vital for a data scientist, which is why this is one of those transitions that is even possible for people with 15 years of experience, not right away. So a person who's doing product management or who's doing project management and who's been in that space for about 15 years wouldn't suddenly become a lead data scientist, but he would be able to start managing data science projects and get into that kind of analytics consulting and that kind of analytical projects, and be able to manage those projects with the kind of technical stack that you learn out of it. The reason why that is possible without having 10 years of data science experience is because they understand the industry. And most of what data science does is tries and leverage the learning that humans have already created and try and create ways in which machines can replicate that thought process. And that's what takes you to some of the most advanced machine learning systems. When we say something, obviously artificial intelligence is a term that's not accessible to a lot of people at this point. We do have automations and rule-based processes, but artificial intelligence is probably one of the most efficient implementation of a machine learning algorithm that takes you to a stage where the models are actually adaptive and can learn in real time from what they do. Now, business intelligence sort of is the first level before it, where a certain industry, how certain processes work, you try and leverage that and build underlying models that can explain that. Which means that when you're trying to become a data scientist, it's about three major skills. It's about programming, it's about mathematics, and it's about business intelligence. The more experienced in your career you get, the better your chances of excelling at business intelligence becomes. The other two knowledge stacks are something that you've got to get a fair degree of comfort with, and that's how you're able to use those modules to do some good work. So when it comes to who can become a data scientist, I believe a lot of people can, but you still got to connect what you're already doing, see what kind of exposure machine learning has gotten in the space that you're already working. If you're not too invested in that already, it makes sense to probably think about complete switch altogether. But if you've been in the space for a decent amount of time, it's about being able to connect that space to the kind of opportunities that you have in data science. And that's how, and that's why knowing your domain and understanding your domain becomes really critical. And with that knowledge, transitioning into data science roles is definitely something that is a reality. That's how I see it. Now, I definitely love to hear from you as well. So like I said, you could keep putting in your feedback in the chats. Once we get through the standard set of questions, we'll come back and try to answer most of your questions. We'd also like to discuss about what your opinion is on some of these questions. All right, so let's move on to the next one. All right, now this is an interesting question again. It says how to make a career transition from the following domains. The reason why this question is so beautiful is because of what we said earlier as well. I think we touched upon this where we said that, people from all kinds of domains are able to make a transition into data science. And the reason why that happens is because it's not so much of a transition right now. It's because data science has already made an entry in those spaces anyways. If you look at sales was very traditional maybe 10 years back, but now there are sales operations teams in almost all major companies where they're doing customer acquisition cost analysis, they're doing sales conversion cycle analysis, they're doing funnel analysis, strength of funnel analysis, customer lifetime value analysis. There's so much data science that's happening, or data analysis that's happening in typically a sales role. The reason why it's now become a possibility even for people who've been managing sales teams to get into more data oriented roles and get into more those kinds of opportunities is because these spaces are already seeing the impact of data science in them. So when you're making a transition from a certain domain, the first step is you've got to identify how machine learning or artificial intelligence or data science has made an impact in your space, and how can you connect some of the work that you're already doing with the technologies that you're learning. Learning and working has to happen at the same time. You're already working in some kind of roles, you're already working on projects by yourselves. Now when you sort of add on the technical stack that you're learning, the knowledge base that you're adding on to yourself, when you add that on to the kind of domain that you're working with, that's where that whole transition becomes much more simpler and a very feasible transition. So you've got to connect your work, the industry that you are working in, with the kind of impact that data science is seen with it. And that's how you're able to make that transition much more smoother. You've got to work on projects, you've got to work on technologies and the impacts of those technologies inside your domain. Make a smoother transition first. Later on, if you see that you've developed core skills around data science and you've gotten that whole understanding of how that space works, even changing industrial areas is not something that does not happen at all. People with 20-25 years of career are able to work in 4, 5, 6 industries even, which means that changing your industry from an automotive to a civil engineering or to a sales is not a big deal, as long as you're able to carry some functional skills that lie at the core of the role that you're getting. So there must be some functional role, some technical skill that you have that carries you into these different industries, because all of these industries have applications for that core data science stack. That's what makes it such a lucrative space to explore. So I think in my mind, when you think about the transition from these different domains, the first thing is to connect the work that you're already doing with the kind of impact that data science has on that space, and then to start building that learning stack so as to complement that, get a role in the same space with more functional responsibilities around data analysis or impact generation, and then slowly get a feel of the area and then think about moving into a different industry if that's what you want to do. I think that's a more graded and smoother approach, which should work out very well for you. Again, that's an interesting question. That was an interesting question. All right. All right. I guess, part of this answer I've already talked about in the previous question that we were talking about. So the question is very nice. It says, how can we make a successful transition without compromising our previous job experience, not to be considered as a fresher? That's a common question that a lot of people have, specifically with people who haven't already made that jump into learning. And it's a good thing to actually do the due diligence before you've actually invested or gotten into a certain kind of learning effort, uh, because it's important to realize that losing out on what you've done earlier is never a good idea. If you're trying to move, if you're trying to learn a new technology, it cannot be a replacement. It has to be an addition. That's how you grow in your career. If you cannot keep replacing things, because if you keep replacing what you are about, then every time that you replace yourself with some new knowledge stack, you again get treated as somebody who's got absolutely no exposure to that space, which is why you don't have that leveraging power. But that's not something that we would ideally want. The way you've got to think about this transition is to first, like I said, connect the kind of applications data science has in the technologies, in the industries that you're working in, and then get into a more graded role. So let's say you're a sales manager who's managing a sales team. The moment you go to larger enterprises and more process oriented companies, you will realize that all these major sales teams have also got sales operations teams. Sales operation teams are ones people who analyze the entire lead generation data to the time by which those companies are ultimately converted. Some part of those companies are ultimately converted. So this sales operations teams analyze the entire journey of a customer from an inquiry stage to the stage where it ultimately gets converted, a certain fraction of them. And in that process, they're able to generate actionable value, which means that the sales teams can now become more focused. You could probably choose and target the right regions. If you're spending in a region that is not giving you even a certain baseline amount of ROI on your investment, you probably go out of that region. So all those decisions that you make in that sense is a lot of analysis goes into that, which is why as a sales professional, as a person who is managing sales team, the next step, if you're trying to move into a more functional data science role, would be to get into a sales operations team, would be to get into a company, or would be to get into your own company's sales operations teams if they are there. What that will do is it would keep you connected to the kind of work that you've been doing, because you are somebody who is experienced in managing a sales team. You're carrying value into that role with your sales experience. So you're just treated as a person who's got an experienced background, and you then add the functional stack of data science, and you're able to get into a new role. By the time that you're going out of that next role, now you've got everything. You'd probably move into a new industry again because you've got that functional tag as well. So when you're making that transition, it's very important to not relinquish what you already have, because that's never a good idea, because the concept has to be of addition and not of replacement. That's my basic principle. And I think it's worked out well successfully for a lot of people. And the example that I gave you was with respect to sales. Similar or very sort of similar parallels can be drawn for all kinds of other industries, be it marketing, be it automotive, any of those industries. There's a lot of, there are design engineers in automotive industries who learn data science and who ultimately are able to work on some really cutting edge technologies, working on sensor data to improve performance. There's a lot that's happening in this space. It's about exploring those right kinds of opportunities and preparing for them in a very targeted way. It's got to be a very targeted search. The moment you're out in the industry, it's not like a college that there are 1,000 companies that are going to come in and you're going to go into those placements, not think about what you want to get, just get a role and get out. So it cannot be about that. Once you're having a certain amount of experience, replacing what you've got and joining as a person who's absolutely got no skill for the role that you've gotten, that's never a good idea. It's always judicious to sort of leverage what you've done before and take that forward. All right, I think that's my bit on this question. All right, so this is the next question that we have. It's got a lot of answers. I think the question is good. It says, what job role do we get after completing a data science course? Now, again, it's like, what salary do we get after I graduate out of college? Nobody can tell you that. There's no fixed answer to that, but they're very well-defined paths that you can take to ultimately get to a defined outcome. So first year of your college, if you learn programming, there's a good chance that you're going to become a developer, which is why when you're learning data science, you've got to focus on what area you want to specialize in right in the beginning, at least 3 to 4 months into your journey. Once you've covered some of the major ideas in machine learning, statistics, you've done a fair bit of practice with Python as well, you have some programming knowledge, plus you've done the knowledge stack, that is structured analysis. At that point, that's the time where you've got to identify what are those areas where you want to specialize in. What is that industry that you want to specialize in? Is it banking and finance? Is it marketing, sales? Is it operations management? Is it supply chain management? You decide what area you want to specialize in, and you target all of your efforts in that area. Now, it could be based on industries, it could be based on functional roles. So when you target your niche based on a functional role, you could make a choice. You could say that I want to become a structured data engineer or machine learning engineer, where I want to work on typical business data. You've got all kinds of roles for that. The name could be business analyst, it could be data analyst, it could be data scientist. You could have all kinds of names for that. Some people might decide that, I want to work with text data. I love the insurance space. There's a lot of text analysis that happens in insurance. Or say I love the e-commerce space. There's a lot of customer sentiment analysis and a lot of reviews that you analyze for those kinds of companies by doing a lot of text analysis. In that case, you specialize into an NLP role. You might think that, I want to analyze digital data. I want to analyze audios and videos and images. And that's the kind of niche that I want to get into. I want to get into a Hotstar and probably help them with the kind of work that they're doing, or probably get into an Uber and help them with the kind of work that they're doing. So depending on what area, what functional area or what industrial area you choose to specialize in, that is going to define the kind of job role that you get out of a data science course. Now, it's important to understand and analyze that once you acquired the knowledge base, it's then about implementing that knowledge base, which is why it's important to work on a lot of these projects. I think even with LearnBay, there are a lot of projects that people keep doing as part of this program. And that is something that is very quintessential to this movement. When you're thinking about a movement, into a new role, in a new capacity, it's important to be able to justify yourself for that position. Because when you're sitting in an interview, you've got to be able to say that, I qualify for this role and I can justify myself for this position because I've got this kind of experience. I've done this kind of work, which sort of correlates very well to the kind of work that you need me to do. And when you do that, you're basically preparing for the kind of job role that you get out of it. So there are different kinds of job roles. Like I said, there are entry-level roles like business analyst and data analyst. You've got data scientist roles as well. Now, these terms are used very loosely. If you're in the business side of the organization, working with sales, operations, supply chain, you generally get called a business analyst. If you're in the product side of things, if you're in the product team, analyzing product features, what bugs are happening more, where's the latency, that kind of analysis you're doing, you get called a product analyst or a data analyst. So the names are different. If you get into the more advanced set of roles, you've got roles like machine learning engineers, or ML ops, where it's about end-to-end deployment, from building a machine, getting the data, to building the models, to deploying it on real-time environments inside applications or inside web applications. Now, that's again something that can be that comes under ML engineer role. Then you've got more expert level roles, AI expert roles like deep learning experts or natural language processing experts. Those definitely require a fairly higher level of mathematical prowess, plus a decent bit of programming ability as well. But those are roles that can fetch really good value, and you might love that kind of work. But it's about identifying, there's a whole lot of things that you can do. You've got to be able to identify the area that you'd like to specialize in, and that's what defines what job role you get out of a course. It's the way that you structure your resume, the way you structure your whole profile, the work that you've done to achieve this. That's what decides what you get. All right. That's a good question, though. All right, coming to the moolah. I think that this is a question that I think everybody loves to sort of at least hear an answer for. how much hike one can expect after the transition. Now, again, that's a very variable question with a very variable answer. It's uh, again, if even if I look at this crowd, for example, I've got people with 2 years of experience, 1 years of experience. I've also got people with 19 years of experience and 25 years of experience, which means that you cannot set a baseline. There is no baseline on what happens to everybody because it's not a college. So for colleges, even for colleges, they give you placement statistics, but they mostly give you the max. They sort of give you the higher value. So in statistics, there's something called a median. You generally never hear what the median value is. You generally hear what the best hikes are. So somebody got a 400% hike. They do not tell you that you were starting at 3 lakhs. But calling out hike statistics is a rather, it's not a very convincing thing to do, but you can definitely set benchmarks for yourself. So what I can do is I can give you what the average market value of these entry level roles are when you enter fresh in the career. So let's say you're just entering the market, you've just graduated out of college, out of different roles, and you're entering as a business analyst or a data analyst. Those are more entry level roles. You should be able to fetch somewhere around 5 to 6, 6.5, 7 lakhs per annum as a business analyst or a data analyst. If you're getting into the more advanced, more maths intensive and programming intensive roles like machine learning engineers or ML ops or deep learning engineers, if you're getting into those kinds of roles with, say, a very decent programming background, you could fetch as good as 8 lakhs to 12 lakhs, in that range as a fresher. Now, wherever you are in your career, you add a 12% to 13% normalized hike every year to the salary that I quoted at a fresh level. Maybe add a few 30-35% hikes as well. That would be when you probably do a switch or get a promotion. That would be the average level at which a data scientist gets paid. So you will see people with 10 years, 12 years of experience. If you follow that normal tendency, that mathematical calculation that I said, if you follow that calculation, you compound that value, you see that that's where most people in that average range are, which means that if you're below that range, you're happy to get, you should be good to get a very good hike at your current experience level. If you're earning below that band, I think rest assured that you definitely should be able to fetch a very good hike. If you're already above that, that's when it can get a little tricky. You'll have to go for the more advanced roles. In that case, it could give you a very good hike, it could not give you a very good hike, but eventually it will help you out in your career. The reason why I say that is because it's not always about the money, and I'm not trying to be somebody who's got a lot of, I'm a middle class guy, and I know that it is about money. But when I say that a role is not always about money, is when I mean to say that sometimes it's got to be about the longevity of your career and the longevity of the skills that you have. You've probably got to assess yourself in that way as well. Let's say you're a testing engineer and you're 10 years of experience. In a lot of cases, I've interacted with several people in that space who tend to get a little saturated with, the growth in their knowledge has already stopped 2-3 years ago, and they've moved to more management related roles in testing, which means that that's a career where you probably have to spend 30 years when you stop learning from a knowledge point of view in 7 years, which is not a good thing to do. In my mind, if I try and assess myself and on employable skills, I wouldn't like to be in a space for more than 15 years when I know that my knowledge is going to stop growing after 7. And it might not be true for everybody. You cannot generalize that. That's an impression that I had with, based on a few conversations that I had with a few people. And it could be true with other spaces as well, where you feel that you've now stopped learning new things. You're mostly around man management and you're doing that management sort of responsibility. And that responsibility itself is something that a lot of people tend to choose after 15 years, 10 years. So that's when I recommend people to get into MBA colleges and do their managements, because by then they've got a very good experience of what the space is and what businesses do and how businesses work. And in that case, leveraging your network at that point in time with a master's in management, it seems like a good idea to me, which means that if you're still looking to grow from a knowledge point of view, plus data science is a technology that's only growing right now. It's evolving very quickly, and the way things have changed in the last 10 years has been quite amazing, to say at the least. But it's changing. These things are actually changing very quickly, which means that this is a space that is only going to keep growing in the next 20 years. So if you've got a good 15, 20 years of career left in you, in that case, it's always a good idea, if you feel that there's some sort of saturation in the work that you're already doing from a learning growth point of view, that's when people try and make this decision. So it's not always just about the hike. It could be because of the new technology that you move into a new role, and then grow from there. Because internally inside this, I'm sure all of you have heard about statistics and everything that goes around in the market, and to a very large extent it's true. It's one of the most rewarding spaces. If you think about technical roles, software development has always been a rewarding technology to be good at. But other than that, what we've seen is there are other technologies as well, and data science is one technology that has really gone up to that level, where the kind of growth in that space as a data scientist is very quick, very fast, and in a lot of cases that is what people are looking at. So which is why sometimes it can that decision can also come out of, even if you're getting a 20-30% hike, you might be happy with it because you're looking at the longevity of the technology that you're getting into and how that expands possibilities for you in your career over the next 10 to 15 years. So that's how I've always thought about it in my interactions with people. That's what I've felt other people think as well. So that's my point of view. It was a good question, a question that a lot of people actually want to find an answer to. Brilliant. All right, so we actually done with the standard set of questions. So that's great. What we'll now do is we'll now go back into the chats, and I would like to look at what you guys have brought in. If you've got any questions that we'd like to look at. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go on to the chat. Let's have a look at some of the questions that have come in. Okay, Sonali Moitra says, is there any use of data science in the teaching field? As I am a teacher of maths and science. I think, to be very frank, as a teacher, it might not help you a lot. If you're running an organization around this, where there's a group of teachers and where you're trying to track how students are growing from a learning point of view, that's what a lot of these tech-based companies are now saying, at least claiming they do, which means that there are applications in growth of a child and management of how students learn. But as a teacher, I would recommend you would probably start learning data science and start teaching that. That could be one suggestion that I could give to you. You could add, because there's a fair bit of mathematics that is involved in data science. It could be something that you're able to learn very well. Sometimes I've seen people actually get into the corporate space. So if that is something that interests you, if you're looking to get out into the corporate market, it's a technology that you could learn and try and make an impact, depending on the background that you're coming with. If you're able to show some really good skills, you could probably join think tanks. There are a lot of think tanks, market research companies that do a lot of analysis in this space. If you're looking to explore that kind of an option, I'm sure data science is something that could be worth learning. As in during the teaching, I think you wouldn't be able to use it too much, but definitely a technology that you could learn and start helping others learn as well. So from a teaching point of view, that could be one way in which you take this out. All right. You got Barira Zabeen says, I'm a fresher. I did my master's in electronics and communication, but I don't know which domain to get into. See, if you've done it in electronics and communication, or you've done it in mechanical, or you've done it in engineering, if you're still just out of college, everything is an option for you. So you shouldn't think too much about what degree I've done and what role I get into. So people from all kinds of, I've seen civil engineers become software developers. I've seen metallurgy engineers become data scientists. So it does not matter what degree you've gotten, because the kind of learning that is required to excel as a data scientist was anyways not covered in any engineering curriculum. It's only in the last 1 or 2 years that now your bachelor's and master's degrees in undergrad colleges are now carrying artificial intelligence and machine learning as specializations. So everybody is just as unrelated from an academic knowledge point of view. So I don't think choosing the domain is something that should take too much of your time. What I would recommend is that you start learning, and once you start learning, look at it from an application point of view. Probably subscribe to a lot of blogs. Based on that, once you start learning, based on that, you can look at what are some of the possible applications around the kind of work that you're doing, and that is something that you could use for growth, and that's the space that you could look to explore. Should not put too much thought into where you get into right now, because if you're very early in your career, it's about learning the stack first. So learn it as quickly as possible, and then look at what technologies engage with your mind, what technologies really interest you. So that's how you take it forward. All right. Siraj says, let me know the scope of data science in finance. Okay. I'm from IT, working on banking software for 10 plus years. I want to learn data science and focus on finance domain. So I think this is a question that's really easy to answer. So finance and healthcare, if you don't know this already, finance and healthcare are the oldest adopters of data science. Statistical modeling has been happening in these industries in the last 100 years. So for the last 100 years, they've been using statistical modeling to take a lot of business decisions, be it credit underwriting decisions, credit lending decisions, fraud, any kind of fraud systems that they're building. So there's a lot of statistical modeling that happens in banks anyways. This is one of the best spaces to be in. So the kind of experience that you're coming with, I think it's perfect. You are coming from a product building point of view. The knowledge of that finance domain is going to help you explore and get into products. You could go for a lot of these fintech companies that are building these neobanks, and a lot of these technologies that are coming up day after day. With your banking experience and knowledge of the data science stack, that could be one of the best things that you can do at this point. That'd be my recommendation. Banking is one of the best spaces to actually explore data science in. Amrita says, what's the importance of statistics in data science and machine learning? See, statistics and machine learning are two ways of solving the same problem. The problem, like I said before, is being able to analyze historical data and create underlying models that can explain what has happened before. The moment you are able to do that, if you're able to explain the history well, you can rely on that model to predict what will happen in the future. So that's the simple problem statement that people have been trying to solve for the last 150 years. For a large part of those 150 years, statistical modeling was the only way of doing it. You had models like regression, you had logistic regression, you'd got a lot of these time series frameworks like ARIMA or seasonal ARIMA, and a lot of these frameworks that were able to do those tasks. In the last 40-45 years, machine learning has come up as an alternate technology that solves a few very major problems. One, it reduces the impact or the relevance of the human element. So it reduces the work that humans have to do. A lot of the work is now internalized inside these machine learning engines. Two, they are computationally very intensive, which means that, and they're very good at it as well. They're very efficient as well as intensive. So it is able to do a lot of calculations and base the decision on a lot of angles, which is why it's good at what it does. Plus, it's very good from a predictive point of view. Plus, it's very fast. It can access and manage huge sizes of data. So because of those reasons, machine learning has become quite popular. But if you look at it, statistics and machine learning are basically two ways of trying to solve the same problem. To be able to look at last 2 years of sales and be able to predict what's going to happen in the next 2 quarters. That is what data science is trying to do in sales. Similar kinds of things for other spaces. If you're a manufacturing company, if I have 2% of my production that goes out of quality check, what is it that I can do to predict what's the reason why that 2% of the product is going out? Is there something wrong with my supply line? What's the problem? If I'm able to identify that, data science is helpful, and that's what data science does there. Even in education, ed tech, howsoever you try and connect it, student performances and how students have done historically over the last year, what kind of questions they get wrong, is it analytical, is it memory based. So there's a lot of analysis that happens in all kinds of domains. Depending on the kind of information you're looking at, you should be able to correlate statistics and machine learning to everything. Another query: if I learn DS from any of the institute, how much will they help me to switch job with current experience of 10 years? And how can I compete with others even after I join a new job? Again, like I said, a person with 15 years of project management experience cannot suddenly become a lead data scientist on a project. So that kind of expectation is not right. So if you worked on technology and product, there's nothing better, right? Technologies and products are moving in the direction where products are now being built that are powered by machine learning systems, machine learning technologies, which means that the additional knowledge stack that you're learning out of this is only going to help you in getting into more advanced products and only expanding your scope, and not as a lead data scientist, but as a software architect. You are primarily a software engineer, a software architect. By learning this, you're now able to connect the two things together. In a lot of companies, you've got separate data science teams and separate engineering development teams, but you still need people to connect the two teams together. Right now, Flipkart is not just cataloging. Right now, the Myntra website is not just cataloging. Amazon is not just creating a catalog of products. Amazon recently launched a store in the US where you can walk into the store, grab something off a shelf, and walk out. Your card gets charged automatically. You don't speak to anyone at all. What kind of engineers are going to build those products? Engineers who've got the knowledge of both those stacks. And that's where you're trying to get into. And that's what you should be approaching. You cannot suddenly expect to become a data scientist. You don't want to become a data scientist. Why would you? And why would you want to become a beginner in data science? You are not. You are a person with a huge amount of software experience, technology, product experience. You leverage that. You leverage that and you get into products where there is machine learning getting used inside the product. And that's where you're able to leverage your previous experience plus the new learning that you've made. That's how you look at it. Hope I've answered your question. All right. I think the domain discussion is repetitive. I've said that, there are applications in all kinds of domains. Even if you look at, the LearnBay website, you'd see that they've created domain specialization tracks for almost all kinds of backgrounds. So to get a detailed sense of what those backgrounds are, you could actually go onto the website and download the brochure for the domain that you're coming with. And these questions are easily answered with that. You'll see what are the popular applications. You'll see what kind of training you can go through to understand, experience that domain. Telecom again, telecom is again a domain that has huge applications for data science. So I started my career in that industry as a marketing analyst. I started my career in that industry with Accenture Digital. Now, there's so much analysis that happens there, whether it is in terms of pricing analytics or whether it is promotional uplift modeling analysis. There's a huge amount of analysis that happens in telecom. So it's about leveraging your previous experience, connecting it to the kind of work that's happening. So it is going to take effort. So whenever you're trying to do something new, it'll take effort. You'll have to do that due diligence. You'll have to figure out. And the reason why it's easy now is because there's so many well-made researched resources already available. Case in point is the LearnBay website. You'll see that, there are several separate modules that are created for domain specialization. You could go out and look at those modules and understand what is it exactly that's happening in those domains. Also, which roles from the ones you mentioned would not require domain knowledge? See, the people who do not require domain knowledge are people who are very early in their careers, who get hired for technical skills and not business expertise. So if you're, let's say, a person who's with less than 3 years, 4 years experience, companies are not too much interested in getting business value out of them, business intelligence out of them, as much as they are caring about getting technical jobs done out of them. So when you're early in your careers, it's mostly about your technical prowess and how good a data scientist you are. Domain knowledge really comes with time. There's no sort of concoction that you can drink and suddenly understand the domain very well. So understanding and knowing a domain is a ongoing task. It cannot happen overnight. So you've got to be able to, when you spend time in a particular industry, that's when you learn what you can make out of that industry. So you've got to keep doing that as an ongoing effort. And once you've understood that these are the popular applications and these are the areas where I could explore this space more, I think that's the right way to approach a transition into that space. But theoretically, every space would require domain knowledge as long as you are an experienced professional. If you're early in your career, not a problem, not a big deal. And yes, a lot of training also happens. So if you're getting into a finance company, there's a lot of training happens. So depending on the kind of industry you're entering, there's a lot of training also that happens for you to get a sense of what's happening in the domain. A lot of that training is quite useful. It helps you get up to speed with what's happening in that industry. Okay, Guru Dutt says, to learn computer vision, should one have to know data science, machine learning, deep learning in that order, or one can pursue computer vision directly? No, not a good idea to learn computer vision directly. See, you've got to understand what all of these modules are. So computer vision is not an algorithm. Computer vision is basically a kind of analysis that you do. It helps you deal with digital data. So audios, videos, and that videos, images, that kind of data set. So it's a kind of analysis that you do. The algorithms that get used in computer vision are mostly neural network based algorithms. Now, neural networks are algorithms which have got an input layer, an output layer, and there are hidden layers in between. If you've got more than 3 hidden layers, we say it's a deep learning. Now, you cannot learn the neural network algorithm directly. You can, theoretically you could, but it'd still be better if you took a more graded approach. So you don't start trying to write an essay before you've written your first sentence. That's how you think about it. So you've got to learn computer vision. It's a good idea to first, and data science is a very large term. So you should say that you need to learn a little bit of statistics, a little bit of machine learning before you get into one of those machine learning. So neural network is what? Neural network is a machine learning algorithm. A special case of neural networks gets called deep learning. You've got modules around that because it's got huge applications everywhere. But you've got to learn a fair bit of programming and then statistics, then machine learning before you actually get into computer vision. Good question. Okay, Riaz says, being a CAD designer, I don't see any possibilities of working on autonomous vehicles right after completing my course. Makes sense. Maybe I'm lacking the visibility right now. That's true. Could happen. HCL, at which I'm currently working, is requesting the applicants from the employees who have at least 1 year of, I don't know how to show that. Don't have it. Advice. Okay. See, that's a very company specific sort of requirement, no doubt about it. That's a company specific requirement. I'm sure you'd be able to get opportunities. You could go and try out, you can go and work on some free, you can try and get some freelance work or assist people in projects. If there is work, some work similar to that that's happening in your company itself, you could try and say that I want to get on board. I want to contribute in that project with my technical skills that I have now. If that is an option in your company, you can say that I do not want any kind of, this is something that I'm doing purely of my own volition, and probably get that experience as part of the works that you see around you. If that is not an option in your company, probably it'd be a good idea to move into a different one. Look at different sectors. You've got a decent amount of experience, I'm assuming. In that case, you should be able to leverage an opportunity elsewhere as well. You're currently working as a designer, so I think moving out of that into analytics would require you to look at companies that are doing that kind of design work, or building those kinds of vehicles where that kind of design work is happening, and looking at those companies, try and get into them, into the work that you're currently doing, and then look for those projects there. It has to be a structured approach in which you are able to see. Most companies will look for some kind of experience. That experience can come from personal projects. So you can leverage some of that from the companies that you're working in. Most cases, people are able to do that. Get on board a project, just help out people in a different project, even if it is not done officially. do it unofficially. The moment you've done it, nobody else can check that, right? You can write once you've done something, you can always write that, because you can justify every bit of it, whether you officially were on that project or not. It does not matter, and the next hiring company is not going to care about that. So just work on that project. You probably have to spend a lot of extra hours in this, but if you really want to get this done, I think work on a project, find access to projects that are similar to this, work on projects like them. I think that's the best way forward. All right. Mihir says, how does data science support senior management? In a lot of ways, see, if you're at a senior management level, you already would have seen that change wherein reports that were coming in decks are now coming on dashboards. So that change in a lot of, whether it is analysis of how teams are functioning or whether it is analysis of how projects are functioning, most of the things that earlier used to remain on Excel sheets and just on Slack and just on your project management tools is now getting connected to dashboards, and that's the kind of visibility that senior management is looking at. That's one of the first places where you start seeing immediately applications for data science, although that's only the BI layer. But if you've got exposure to that knowledge stack, you could improve that analysis much further. So what you're only doing as post event, something hindsight analysis that you're doing could be converted into something that has sort of forbearing value as well. It is able to predict things into the future and help you improve the process that you're working in. So it's about what you are just something that you are managing could now become a strong point for you. So from a senior management level, that's what I've seen, when it comes to finding direction for how certain teams should be working, how the goals should be aligned. I think this is something data science has always found value there. You already would have seen a lot of that, the way projections are made and the way reports are created. There's a lot of shift that has happened. I think it helps you stay adrift with that shift. Umar says, I've got 1.5 years of experience. I think that's very, again, you're very early in your career. Shouldn't think about, what industry to go in and where to do. I think as of now, even if you get treated as a fresher, as a data scientist, you'll still get a better pay package and still be able to make the most out of that space. So I don't think you should care about what industry to join and how to join. It's about learning the right skills. So if data science is one of the easier technical skills to get into. So if you look at IT roles, you've got development or you've got data scientist or data analysis. So either you go for the analysis role or you go for the development role. Development roles are more programming intensive. They're still very good, no doubt about it. They're still one of the most highest paying jobs in the country as well as abroad. So they're still very good. So if you think that programming is a strength for you, you could probably also approach software development. If you think programming is not what you like and it's more around being able to analyze businesses and data, and that is something that you find more interesting, data science could be a good choice then. All right. Okay, Arnab says, I did my executive MBA recently after almost 2 decades of experience. Brilliant in multiple roles, R&D, design, manufacturing. Perfect. That's one of the best times to do your MBA. And that's always, I think I put that out as well a little while back. That's the way I think about an MBA degree. It's best done when you've got a decent amount of experience in the industry and you leverage all of that network to really make the most out of that management degree. But how data science will help me to take next leadership role? What skill sets will be asked? So now, depending on the kind of space you're trying to get into with your MBA, a lot of people after their MBA tend to get into the finance side of things or try and get into senior marketing management, those kinds of roles. Now you worked in R&D, you worked in design, so it seems like you're coming from a technical sort of background. In that sense, it could be around project management at large scale levels or team management for analytics consulting teams. So you could get into large service companies like the Accentures and the Wipros, There's several major companies as well, and you could probably look at project management at large scale levels, managing 10 projects, getting business. So with all of that, I think the MBA plus sorry, the knowledge of the data science stack could help you move into those kind of that kind of project management. I think it could be very product based as well. See, if that is what you're interested in, product based roles, that's another road to take. That's another way of thinking about it. The other way of thinking about it is to get into the business side of things. Now that you've done an MBA, it could be about, the senior leadership levels are mostly about finding direction, what marketing goals should be, what OKRs should be, and that kind of management again can, get impacted a lot with data science principles. You'll obviously have people in your team to do the hands-on side of things, but the knowledge of what can be done from a predictive or a prescriptive point of view. Now, as a marketing manager, as a person who is managing a $1 million budget for marketing, the brute force way is to spend some money across different channels, get get a sense of what's happening in the market, which channels are doing better and all. It would probably take you 3-4 years to get a sense of how the market works and what channels are more effective, and you ultimately decide, okay, these are my good channels. Or you could just look at last 2 years of data and make that decision immediately, right away, based on what has happened historically. You could immediately make a deduction on what and where to spend my $1 million. Now that's a decision. If you have that cognitive insight that there are ways in which we can actually look at what has happened historically and get a sense of where do I spend across. It's not just analytical modeling, it's also optimization. So you do analytical modeling, calculate elasticities, find out which marketing channels are more effective, and then do optimization on top of that to decide how do I allocate my $1 million across these different 20 channels. So depending on the kind of role, like I said, depending on the kind of role that you're looking at, whether it is more business oriented or more technical, you could still get into technical roles as well, even with an MBA. But because of the background that you're coming with. But if you're looking to get into business, I think there's a whole set of opportunities. Data science has an impact in almost all of those opportunities. All right. Uma says, I've got 5+ years of teaching maths. How should I focus towards data science? Should I have an expertise in math and statistics with programming, or learn the business side to get a job in data science? All right. You've got teaching experience in math. So if it's about learning data science, I don't think it's going to be a challenge. As long as you've, so the first thing is you've got to do some due diligence around programming, see if programming is something that interests you. Since you've got teaching experience, learning, I'm assuming, should not be a major challenge. So it'll be mostly about trying to get some project work onto your resume. Because when you get out of that kind of a role and try and enter into the corporate industry, people will ask you, why should I get you back in the industry? Now you've got to be able to justify that, which is why I'd recommend that you probably get into contractual roles with companies and help them out with some data science work, even if it is for free. So that those can be options that you can sort of look at, because what that will do is once you've learned this space, once you've learned, you could do some projects yourself. And those personal projects, like a lot of good programs will help you work on a lot of data science projects. So you work on those projects and you build that relevant portfolio. Now, once you've built that, I think moving into data science, so doing that decision, whether you can't really learn the business side. In my mind, that's how it is. Business side is something that only grows when you are in the business. So you can't really learn that. That's not very easy. But what you can do is probably explore this, explore projects, work on a few open source projects that are available, maybe get in touch with people who are already working in that space and fork out a few projects from there. But that's how you look at this transition. You probably have to learn the skills. I think learning will not be a major challenge for you, given that coming from that kind of background where you've stayed in touch with mathematics. But then it's going to be about some personal work that you do. There's a lot of data that is available on Kaggle. You can work on those projects because you'll be entering as a person with no experience in the market. I think if you've done some project work by yourself, I think that should be more than enough. That should suffice. All right, brilliant. Amrita says, how to get these contractual roles. See, I think early in your life, early in your careers, when you've not entered the job market and all, it's relatively easier. because you can get internships and all of that. After that, it's going to be about network. You will have to probably leverage your network, find out friends, family members, anybody in your network who's got access to those kinds of opportunities, and just help them on a project, whether you're getting certified for that work or not. Getting certified, getting a freelance gig is the ideal scenario, but that's difficult to get. As a person who's just entered a space, I can't honestly tell you that you'll be able to fetch a lot of freelance work. But what I can say is you could probably try and engage with people who are working in this space, try and get connected to them, help them on a project or two. There are a lot of people who are building companies at this stage. So look at Angel. There's a popular startup forum called angel.co. Startups keep listing requirements there. Maybe work for a few people for free there. That could help you gain some relevant experience. You probably have to sacrifice something, but when you're early in your career, it does not require a lot of effort. If you've 10 years, 12 years, 15 years down in the career, and you worked in some technology before this, then when you're moving into it, you've got to relate it to the kind of work that you've done. That's the very most important thing here. Okay, Vinay says, sir, I have 16 plus years experience in different domains, but from 1 year I was doing business. If I do data science, ML and AI course, can I get job opportunities as fresher? See, these questions nobody can answer for you. These are very subjective questions. It depends on what you're doing and how much you're doing, how much effort you're putting into it. If you've got 16 years of experience in the market, first, to answer this question, I would need to know what businesses you worked in. Then I would say that once you identified that, okay, these are the industries that have already I worked with, I'd probably try and leverage some opportunities in those industries. See, because you worked for 16 years, getting back into the market and getting a job is not a problem at all, because you've already shown that kind of experience. Having a 1 year gap does not matter at all. Even with COVID, everybody knows that a lot of people have lost roles and who are not working because of COVID and all that. That's a very accepted thing. So you've got to be able to leverage the kind of work that you've already done, connect that to data science, probably get a role even in that, if that has to be the choice. Gaps are more difficult to justify. Transitions are easier to do. It's easier to ask to get a question like, if you're working in as a mechanical engineer for 2 years, why do you want to get into data science? Then why have you not been working in the last 2 years? That's a more difficult question to answer. So if you're looking to get back into the market, into the corporate market, I think it'd probably be more sensible to get into a role right away, which is related to the kind of work that you've done earlier. It'll be easier to fetch, and then look at learning and exploring new roles from there. Like I said, the other is, since you already worked for a decent amount of time with this financial stability, you could use this 1 year and you show a lot of your personal work while you learn. A lot of the personal work that you're doing can be shown as work that you've done through your company. You could probably do some work with respect to the business that you are doing anyways. Maybe structure some of that work as analytical, and that gives you experience. And you should never think about getting in as a fresher. That does not make any sense. You should never, why would you relinquish all those years of effort that you've put in the market? You must get credit for it, and you will. It's about being able to justify yourself for it, but you will get credit for it. You do not just become a fresher because you stopped working for 1 year. That's not how the market works. At least that's my impression of it. So I think you should be able to learn and then take it forward from there. Absolutely. Amrita says, I have helped researchers with their research data as I'm into teaching statistics for past 5 years. Absolutely, it'll help with your profile. Get some of that work published. Try and get some of the work that researchers are doing published, and try and get some of your contributions cited in there. That's very relevant. You can't get better than. There are so many research teams in corporates. I'm sure you know about that. And a lot of these large companies have research teams, proper academicians who come in and work with them. So if you get some content published, which is related to the work that you've done, I think there's nothing better than that. That could be a very good way of approaching this. Gaurav says, I have 9+ years of experience in technical recruiting HR domain. How does data science help me for growth in career? Will it be easier to get in the industry? See, HR again, HR analytics, again, there's a whole lot of analysis that happens even in HR. If you've already gotten into the management side of things and you're now thinking about moving into the more strategic positions, it could be about, recruiting though has not a lot of scope for data science, but human resources absolutely does. So attrition analysis in companies, satisfaction indexes, a lot of analysis happens in data science. So I'd recommend you move more from recruiting towards the human resource side of things. So if you get into the HR side of things, that is slightly easier from a movement to a data science, more functional data science role. I think that will make it easier. That'd be my suggestion. You should ideally try and get out of recruitment directly and move into the human resource and management side of things. Right. I hope I've answered most of your questions. If you got anything else, please feel free to put it in the chats. I'd be happy to answer them. As long as, it's different from what we've already answered. I think the domain things we've already covered, almost all domains have applications. If you want to read about it, learn more about it, one of the best places is the website of LearnBay. Just go out and look at the different domains. There are about 9, 10 different brochures that you will find for all kinds of backgrounds. You'll have a background. So HR is one of those backgrounds. E-commerce is one of those backgrounds. So I would definitely recommend going on to the website and looking at those modules specifically, understanding what is it that is happening in that space. Mohan is still writing. Research in data science and AI, are there any better resources to begin reading research? Because I'm not used to it. If you're talking about self-learning, there's several good places to start learning. Books are in a lot of cases, books are one of the best ways. So if you look at books, you'll find a lot of books. There's a For Dummies series. There's Statistics for Dummies, Python for Dummies, Machine Learning for Dummies. There's a For Dummies series. That's one series that you can look at if you're looking to learn these topics. There's a book called Introduction to Statistical Learning by Trevor Hasty, and there are a couple of other authors as well. That's another good book, but a more advanced book. So you should not, that shouldn't be the first read. If you're looking at statistics, I think you should start with Statistics for Dummies, Machine Learning for Dummies after that, and that's how you learn. There's several good blogging websites as well. You'll find Towards Data Science is one of them. It's a very good blogging website. Analytics Vidya is also a very good blogging website. So those are again good resources. But you talk about research. Research is getting research papers and reading research papers can get challenging. If you haven't already learned the space and the science, reading research papers right away is not the best idea. So you should probably first go through the concepts first and then think about learning this. The books I mentioned were Statistics for Dummies, Machine Learning for Dummies, Python for Dummies. It's a series. There are several For Dummies books. That's one you can look at. And then there's an Introduction to Statistical Learning. That's another good book that's freely available. The authors have made it freely available on the website. So you can just go on to the internet and search for Introduction to Statistical Learning and you'll get the book. It's a very good book, but slightly more complex and advanced book. Hi, sir. How do we grow our network in data science? LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place to explore people in data science. Try and get connected to as many of them as possible. If there are people who are very active, you could just go ahead and follow them. Try looking at good resources. LinkedIn is the best place. I think when it comes to networking, there's no better alternative than LinkedIn. Diaz says machine learning, deep learning also finds interesting. Yeah, these are all very interesting. A deep dive into these topics would probably take a few months. So it's difficult to deep dive into it in an AMA. These are definitely different. We've already talked a fair bit about what machine learning is and what deep learning was. We talked about that anyways. So I think those are very good topics. Those are very good modules that help you explore some of the best ways in which you can analyze data, and can be quite useful. How can I use IoT with data science? That's brilliant. There's a lot that is happening around power management, energy consumption. There's a lot that's happening with IoT, Internet of Things, where data science is getting connected to it. Uh, Finance is going to probably look at blockchain and data science developing together to become one of the central pillars of what finance evolves into. Just like that, IoT also sees huge amount of impact both on hardware and software that data science is actually bringing in. So even IoT is one of the major areas where data science is getting used heavily, rapidly. So again, interesting space to explore. Amrita says you boosted up our confidence. Thanks a lot. That was the purpose, I believe. Do we need to have extensive knowledge of Python for clearing interviews? Not so much. Not if companies really want extensive knowledge, then they'll give you a written test in Python. In an interview, people generally do not ask too much. So it's mostly around logic and conditional statements. And if you're able to get a sense of how to write correct code, if they're able to get that sense, they're happy with it. They wouldn't ask you hardcore programming questions. It's mostly around scenario based ML questions. Yeah. So I think it's the second part that they are more focused on. So the analysis stack. So how much do you know how to analyze data is more important than how you analyze it. Everybody knows that how you analyze it is mostly available on Google. So that's not the part that a lot of people focus on. So I think we've covered most of the questions. I think there are no new questions that are coming in. Venkat wants me to share my career experience. So I think I'll do that. If there are any more questions, I think we've already covered most of the ideas. If there's anything else, feel free to write that. So I have, so as for my career, I have a master's in economics, and I started off as a data scientist. I worked in marketing analytics and customer analytics with a service company, a large service company. And I've also worked with startups. I've worked as a lead data scientist there. So I've seen both sides of things, from how processed and clean data can be to how raw and unclean data can be. So that's been my experience. I've also taught as a freelancer topics in statistics and machine learning. I love teaching. That's one thing that I like to do. Plus I'm working in that space, so that gives me a good perspective as well, helps me understand what the market really demands. So in that sense, that's been my experience. It's a little more than 5 years, not a lot of experience, but I've probably just started, but it's a good one. Data science definitely a space that is worth exploring, no doubt about it. It pays off well. It gives you a good reward, as well as it's pretty engaging and interesting stuff to work on. That's one of the reasons why I love it. What is the industry trend in data science qualification? Since in past couple of years, many academic institutes are coming up with a degree. See, there are different people. Some people care about degrees a lot. And I'm talking about students. I think from a hiring manager point of view, I think degrees do not matter too much. That's been my experience. I have hired a lot of people in data science. I never considered it. I have seen a lot of other hiring managers also not consider it. But that's not to say that, a degree, a master's, some people just want to get a master's. They've got academic inclinations. For them, it's a good idea. But you've got an inclination to stay in the industry. In that case, a master's is not very relevant. If you've really got to do a master's, maybe spend 10 years, 15 years in a technical role and then do a management degree. I think that's something that is more useful. That's always been quite useful. If you use it like that, I think it's useful. But for data science, I think it's more about knowing. See, there's a huge demand supply gap in data science. There's several thousand roles that have to be filled up, and we only have say 1/3 of or 1/4 of that workforce available. which is why it's easy to get into this role. People don't really care about degrees and diplomas in data science. If you've got the skills, if you've got some work to show for it, I think that's the best way of getting into this. All right. On this note, we'll sort of close out this session. I think I hope this was helpful. I've tried to answer most of the questions that you made out. Let's stay motivated. I think the purpose of this was to also motivate folks and get a good sense of what this space can offer. So I hope I've been able to do that. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great rest of the day, and bye-bye. See you next time.